I'm pretty sure my neighbors think that they live above like a crazy person who just talks to themselves for like hours a day, which technically is not wrong. Hey, what is up everyone? It's Emily and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to your bookish hot takes. I have been wanting to do a video like this for a while. I have finally gotten around to it, so I'm very excited for this. I asked over on my Instagram and here on the YouTube community thread thing for people to send me their bookish hot takes. If you don't know what a hot take is, it's like a controversial opinion about something, but in this case I wanted it to be specifically book related. And you all really came through with some awesome answers to this question. If in the future this is something that you would be interested in participating in and sending in your own thoughts and opinions, check me out over on Instagram. I will have the link down in the description below. I tend to be more active on there from a day-to-day basis, so if you're ever curious about what I'm up to, what I'm reading or working on, that is definitely the first place to go. YouTube, I tend to only have videos up once a week at most. So if you want to keep up with me on a more day-to-day thing, Instagram's definitely the way to go. And then if I do something like this again in the future, you'll be one of the first ones to know about it and can put in a response. My phone is frozen, hold on. Just a disclaimer up front, you know, whether or not you agree or disagree with any of these takes is okay. If you want to have conversations down in the comments, it would be super awesome. Just obviously make sure to keep everything respectful. I'm gonna share my opinions as well. You do not have to agree with me. But yeah, I think this could be really fun. So let's get these takes rolling. The first take I have is I like my books to look like they've been read. So I definitely think in certain areas of the community this could be a hot take because there are lots of people who, you know, don't want the spines of their books to be broken. They don't like dog-earing pages. It's like sacrilege. And people who really want their bookshelves to look pristine and perfect. I am definitely someone who does like my books to look read as well. I really love old copies of books that look like they've been well loved. Not necessarily falling apart at the spine, but I love yellowed pages. I think old books smell amazing and, you know, books are meant to be loved and read and shared again, and so like I'm also definitely someone who's not afraid to break the spine of a book or dog-ear pages or whatever. Like that's what they're for, because I want my books to be loved and to be, you know, they're not trophies on the shelf that I'm never gonna touch and just let them collect dust. You know, I want them to change as I change. So like I'm definitely someone who is like that. And you know, if you like annotating your books, even if it's not like aesthetic or something, you know, kind of the same thing, write in them, let them live with you. Like when you go back and you reread it, you'll have a whole new frame or lens to go back to it with, because you will not be the same person that you were the first time that you read it. So that's how I feel about that. I definitely agree with this take. I don't think it's like super hot. This could be like a lukewarm take. The next one that I have is all genres have tropes, not just romance. And this is just fact. So I don't think this is like necessarily a hot take. I think that the romance community and in some ways also the fantasy community definitely lean heavy into tropes the most in terms of marketing. I think that's just because when people read romance, they're looking for certain things out of it and they like certain things or dislike certain things. So I think in terms of marketing and people talking about those books, they definitely rely a lot heavier on those tropes and those formulas to create those stories. But yeah, I mean, every genre has tropes. Fantasy in particular, I feel like has also a lot of tropes. I definitely think that this is just fact. The next one I have is dust covers on hardbacks suck and are inconvenient. I have to, you know, I somewhat agree with this because I can't read with the dust cover on my book. It gets in the way. I can't hold the book correctly, and if I try it, it like will bend it and then it will wrinkle and rip the dust cover. So I'm not a big fan of that. I don't think that they necessarily suck, but I am also just someone who prefers paperbacks. So I'm probably not the best one to talk about this take necessarily. I just feel like hardcover books for whatever reason just have never held up as well for me. Like the spines are not as strong or something like that. So, but yeah, I think with the dust covers, in Belgium, I know for like a lot of the hardcovers, the print that would be on the paperback is just printed onto the hardcover, which that doesn't bother me, although then it feels like it's missing something at the same time, so I really don't know. I have like almost no opinion on this. I'd love to hear if anyone else has any strong feelings one way or the other about this. The next one I have is Colleen Hoover books aren't necessarily bad, they are just the soap opera of literature, and to compare them to literary masterpieces is unfair to both genres. Okay, yeah, this is a pretty hot take. I think BookTok would come for your throat. So I'm gonna react to this as someone who has never read a Colleen Hoover book, just like I have no interest in her writing and the genre aspects of which she writes in. I definitely think it's fair to say that it's not fair to compare Colleen Hoover to literary masterpieces, but I think it also depends on what you consider a literary masterpiece. They're definitely trying to do two different things, and it can definitely be said that Colleen Hoover's books, for whatever reason, are very entertaining and they appeal to the masses very heavily for one reason or another. And I think that might have to do with like your reasoning for reading. You know, if you're someone who reads just for leisure and, you know, just to like shut your brain off, it's a very easy book to just kind of graze your eyes over. You get the story, it's interesting enough to finish it, you know, that sort of deal. My dislike for Colleen Hoover is not even just her like writing qualities, but I definitely think that this is legitimate. And I think that's a hot take I definitely agree with. I think how much spice is in books is really weird. Like, I get that it's a preference, but it shouldn't be the sole judge of a book. Just read fan fiction. This is a spicy take, pun intended. I definitely think a lot of readers would love to disagree with this, but I have to say I personally do agree with this in at least some aspects. So before you like jump down my throat, I don't read a lot of like erotic books in the first place. So just that's my perspective coming into this conversation. Don't mind it in books, but it is not why I read books, and I don't go looking for it. I will say it's really interesting when an author is promoting one of their books and all of the comments are like, is it spicy? Is it spicy? How spicy is this book? Because I have to say, like, if a book sounds interesting enough to you based on the description alone, whether or not there is erotica in this book should not be the reason you pick it up. At least in my opinion. It should supplement the story. And if you don't want a story and you just care about the erotic elements of a story, there is a whole internet with free resources that you can read for free, which is just how I kind of feel about that. Now, you do not have to agree with me on that. There is a slew of authors who make a ton of money off of these kinds of books, and it's amazing. Good for them. I do think it's like becoming to the point now though where like every book has some very graphic depictions of like erotica. I'm using that word because I'm trying not to get like flagged on YouTube. I do think that it's become commonplace now where like every book is now expected to have those kinds of depictions in it, and I don't necessarily think that that's right either, especially depending on the age category. I could do a whole video on why I think that smut doesn't belong in YA, because it doesn't, but that's a secondary thing. But I do think it's interesting now that like if you want to write fantasy, if you want it to do well within the younger audiences, or like the like 20s to 30s group and like upper teens, like you are almost expected to have that in it, which I think is getting to the point where it's almost too much now, in my opinion. Now that I think what it is that there isn't a clear distinction anymore between romances that are just romance and books that are meant to have several very detailed and explicit scenes, because not everybody wants both those things, right? And you can no longer tell just based on the blurb on the back or the cover what you're gonna get out of that book. And especially when a lot of these new adult covers or adult romance and erotica, like they all have very similar looking colors. The art style is very similar, and it's because that's what's selling really well. Going down this hole now where people are disappointed if they're reading a book expecting spice and it's not in it, or people are reading a book because they think it's a wholesome romance, and all of a sudden they have like 6 graphic scenes shoved into a book that like they were not expecting. So I don't know, it's very interesting. So yeah, I do overall agree with this take. I hope no one is mad at me about that. People who read 300 plus books a year need to calm down. I don't know if like I would say calm down is the right word. I do wonder how people are able to consume that much each year though. Like props to you if you are truly reading over 300 books a year. I didn't even make it to 100, and I think I did a really great job with how many books I read last year. I can't even imagine tripling that. Who has the time? Not me. I know I have heard people who read children's books to their kids and then they count those, or, you know, obviously short stories, novellas, plays, those are very short. You can go through 2-3 of those a day. It's just wild and baffling to me if someone is truly reading 300 plus like novels a year. I just wonder how they have time, or if they're just like really great at speed reading. I have no idea. I definitely see where this is coming from. I don't think that there's any problem with reading that many books a year, as long as you're not putting other people down for not reading as much as you, because like some people only have the time to read 5 books a year, or the capacity within themselves to only read that much. That's just how I feel about it. But the next hot take I have is people that read more are more empathetic humans. I have to agree with this, and I think it comes from the idea that when you read, especially if you read fiction that does not revolve around people like you know, if you're reading about other people's circumstances or people who experience the world differently than you, I do think it gives you a greater understanding of like just the human condition, I guess. I feel like I learn a lot about people when I read, especially when I read books that are about other countries or cultures or like experiences, like I said. I'm not saying that that makes me like understand truly what every person is going through who's ever been in a situation like that, but I do think if you're someone who hasn't experienced something that a lot of people in these books have, it can help you at least kind of grasp a even just basic understanding and allow you to learn more and to feel more for other people. I think it's the same thing with theater as well. Like when you do theater and you connect with humans and the situations that people often find themselves in, like, do tend to lean more empathetic. Readers tend to be more reflective, I feel like, and I think readers tend to just look at the world a little bit differently. I'm not saying everybody does that, but I do kind of agree with this hot take. Unless the only thing you read is like the apathetic 40 power whatever book. So my next hot take is that it's perfectly acceptable to judge people based on the books they like because it says a lot about them. I am like, these hot takes, I feel like I am like really agreeing with a lot of them across the board. This one I feel like you can't solely judge a person based on the books that they read, but I definitely think it gives you an indication like who they are and what kind of things that they like. I mean, like, we all like to joke about people who misunderstand Fight Club or The Catcher in the Rye, and they say that that's like their favorite book, but like for all the wrong reasons. You can like certain books, but depending on why you like it can really be telling. And like if someone came up to me and they told me that like their favorite book was The 40 Rules of Power, I would really start to question why that is, because there's so many better books out there. And I don't even just like, that's not me like hashing on nonfiction. You can love nonfiction, but if your favorite nonfiction books are about like how to manipulate other people or whatever, like that's a little bit of a yellow red flag for me. So I do think I overall agree with this take, but I don't think it can be the only thing. Like, why is it their favorite book? I would have to question. The next hot take I have is I hate when authors put pop culture references in their books. This one is 50-50 for me because I have seen authors pull it off well. For me, it fit into the world because like I read this one book, Out of Character, and the main character is someone who role plays online, and so there was a lot of mention of like an online presence on the computer and stuff like that, and like watching TV shows. Now the TV show they watched was like made up, but it was very reminiscent of like Star Trek, Star Wars. And within that book, even though there were lots of pop culture references, it didn't bother me. Now there are other books where it's like, this has no business in here, and it really takes me out of it. It takes me out of the world that this author is trying to create. Now I don't know why, if it's because like books for whatever reason in my head are meant to be in like some alternate dimension where like TV shows and TikTok don't exist. Yeah, it's kind of 50-50 for me. And I think it really depends on the context of the book. Like when characters start using slang, and like new slang especially that just like hasn't really melded into my vocabulary yet, it can definitely pull me out. The next one I have is some self-published books are way better than traditionally published books. I'm biased on this one because I'm a self-pubbed author, but what I will say, even though I 100% agree with this take, one of the reasons I think that is because self-published books do not have to adhere to the same restrictions that traditionally published books do. Trad books normally need to cater to the market as a whole, so they need to be books that are very marketable to most people, versus I feel like self-published books you can really niche down and find exactly what you're looking for, and at the same time you have a lot more access to stories that just aren't being pushed by the big traditional publishers. So for BIPOC and LGBTQ authors who a lot of their stories just never make it to the traditional publishing houses because of one roadblock or another, they oftentimes have an easier time self-publishing their books when able to, and so I think the stories tend to be more unique and you can experience a lot of like a wider variety of stories when they're self-published, in my opinion. This take did continue and say it is just harder to sort through them since there are so many self-published books out right now. And that is also true. Like millions and millions and millions of self-published books are being pushed out, and now with the rise of AI, anyone can self-publish a book even if it's written by a robot now, and you can like have a new book up on Amazon today. Oftentimes hiring editors is very expensive, and that's why people go the traditional publishing route in the first place. And so a lot of self-published books can be poorly edited if they're edited at all. And oftentimes hiring a cover designer is hard. So I definitely think it is harder to find, you know, if you want to call it a diamond in the rough or whatever, it is a bit harder to find self-published books, you know, and the ones that do end up doing crazy well do end up getting picked up by traditional publishers because they want to make money. So it is really interesting. I think more popular books are started out as being self-published than people think, including things like the Atlas Six, The Martian. You do have to kind of search a bit harder, I think, especially because all of the marketing comes down to the author, but great self-published books are out there. For me, at least, I do think that self-published books are trying to push the boundaries a bit more of like the publishing industry and trying to give readers exactly what they want. And I'm hoping as time goes on, more and more people realize that and give self-published novels more of a chance. The next one I have is romance is popular because people just need a break from the hard parts of life. I don't know if this is like super high. It's probably lukewarm. I think people who read romance more frequently would be better suited to say one way or another. Say like for me, I tend to lean into fantasy to escape the hard parts of life. Like instead of dealing with my issues and my struggles, I would rather deal with them while I'm watching a main character slay a dragon or something like that. I think with romance, you're guaranteed a happy ending. And that's the difference. And I do think that a lot of people tend to lean into that just because they're soft, they're cozy, they're sweet. And I mean, clearly it's popular. I'm pretty sure romance is the most popular genre by far. You know, the more I talk about it, the more I'm like going into this take and I'm agreeing with it. Especially, you know, life's always been hard, but for a lot of people since 2020, it's only gotten worse. And I definitely think that is probably a big reason why it's taken off even more. And BookTok in general, but why I like books and escapism has just kind of catapulted. So yeah, I think the more I think about it, the more I agree with this take. The next hot take I have is that publishers don't need to wait that long to give us paperback versions. I mean, listen, I completely agree. I'm a paperback girly, and I often just want to wait for paperbacks. I oftentimes, unless it is a book that is like the book of the year for me, I try not to buy hardback if that's the only option. The reason publishers do this is because they make more money. It can go a couple different ways. I'm pretty sure someone will probably have to fact check me on this, but like some books, they have to sell a certain amount of hardcovers before they'll push the paperback. But if a book is selling really, really well hardcover, they will wait to push the paperback out because the profit margin is higher with hardcover. Because like the printing cost between paperback and hardcover, I don't think is a huge difference, but you can charge way more for a hardcover. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Someone will have to double check, but yeah. it's a money thing. It's a profit thing. And listen, hardcovers are beautiful. And like the special editions, also beautiful. Love them. Not saying that those aren't great. But yeah, that's, I think, one of the big reasons. So no, I completely agree with this take. Unless you're someone who only collects hardcovers, then I'm sorry. The next hot take I have is BookTok is not destroying literature. BookTok is just mostly young girls and women who like to read easy romance books. And there's nothing wrong with that. So of course it's mostly promoting those books, and of course the publishing industry is catering to that to get their money. Good books are still being published, they just aren't as widely promoted on BookTok. I think overall this take 100%. I don't think BookTok is destroying literature. I do agree, I think BookTok is just pushing its flavor of book, and because it's predominantly young women and girls, what do they read? They read YA, they read romance, they read romantasy, and those are the books that are getting pushed out, and so publishing industry is just trying to make money, so that's what they're pushing out. I definitely follow that line of logic, and I have to agree that that's probably what it is. There are still plenty of other great books that are being published, just not on the BookTok shelves. However, I will say I wish every bookstore these days didn't look like it was just the BookTok shelf. Part of that has to do with the fact that English sections here tend to be very small, even in the big bookstores, because English is not an official language in this country, which is totally okay, I get it. So I personally tend to have a harder time finding books in the bookstores that aren't BookTok in English, because the stores tend to just all be the BookTok books these days, in the English section at least. So I am curious though if the publishing timeline in trad publishing has been shortened, because it used to be like 10 months to 2 years that a book would be pushed out through traditional publishing, but it's feeling more and more like it's less than that now, or that it's just overall being shortened to like 10 months. And it feels like a lot of the newer books that are being pushed out are being written to tropes because that's what's selling, and that they're not being edited as much. And if that is the case, then I guess it would be fair to say that like BookTok and this like fast overconsumption that's happening within the book community is kind of pushing more books out that are maybe of lesser quality. I don't like using that verbiage, but I hope you know what I mean. Like that books that maybe just needed a little bit more time in the oven, but they're getting pushed out because they're gonna sell anyway. Like that's what I'm kind of thinking. But I mean, what do I know? Nothing. The next hot take I have is that prologues and epilogues are just bonus material. The fantasy authors and girlies are gonna come for you. Yeah, I would say this is a pretty hot take. I think there are plenty of people who would maybe disagree with this. I do think that if a prologue/epilogue is doing their job, they will be adding something to the baseline of the story. I don't know if that made sense. It shouldn't just be in there just to be in the book. It should serve a purpose. I do think that at least within fantasy, it's a nice way to skip timelines or skip ahead in time or go back in time without like super confusing the reader. But like, for example, if you're reading a romance book and it does an epilogue where it's like a year later and like it's exactly what we all assumed would happen anyway, I definitely think that just counts as like bonus material, like just a little bit of extra fluff at the end to either make a book longer or serve some other purpose. I'm not really sure, but yeah, this is a pretty hot take. I feel like people might really disagree with that. The next hot take I have might be the hottest one yet. And that's, I love a good enemies to lovers, but not every story needs a retelling with a villain and a hero love story. I feel like some people, I mean, okay, like, obviously no one is gonna say, like, every book needs a hero to villain love story, but I do think that it's starting to run its course and people are gonna start to be tired of it soon. And then, yet, at the same time, I still see graphics and videos all the time talking about enemies to lovers. I do think there is a reason it's popular, there's a reason everybody loves it, and not everyone has to love it. It's not my favorite trope or anything by any means, but I do see why it's effective and why, you know, the whole like no one can touch her thing, like I do understand like where that comes from, and I agree that it can be really well done, but it is starting to get old that it's like every single book within the first like 3 chapters you can usually kind of figure out what's gonna happen, and sometimes that's really nice, but sometimes it's just not what you want. Or I kind of wish that we wouldn't lean so heavily into the formula, and that we would, that like authors or would kind of twist it another way and do something unique with it. The problem is that a lot of books are writing to formula, and it's just not, there's just not enough variety within it right now, and so every book is starting to feel really similar. Yeah. The next one I have is, a book doesn't have to be literary genius to be a good book and enjoyable. The feeling can be great even if the writing is subpar, and I can still rate it 5 stars. Yeah, there's going to be people who disagree with this. This is a hot take. I think, yes. I mean, I totally agree with this, because I'm someone who, like, I'm very generous with my stars. I give a lot of books high ratings, mainly because if I finish a book, it's because I liked it 9 out of 10 times. And even if the book isn't the most groundbreaking thing that's ever come out of someone's mind, if I enjoyed it, if I cried, if I felt like I went on a journey, I will still rate it very high, even if it's not, the best written thing ever. I feel like the only time I really can't get through a book, or I really hate a book, is like, first of all, if the author or the characters do something absolutely abhorrent that I like cannot stand by, and like it's not justified in any way, obviously. But also, like, if there's just no plot, like if there's nothing happening whatsoever and I don't care about the characters, that's the only time that I really just can't make it through a book, that I just don't like it. I tend to enjoy most of the books that I read, and a lot of the times the like amazing classic works I end up not enjoying so much, even though you're supposed to. Just because, what made them great 100 years ago doesn't necessarily mean that it's great now, today. But that's a different thing. I'm definitely someone where it's like, if I enjoyed the book, 5 stars, no problem. The next one I have is, smut scenes are not unnecessary in the same way fight scenes aren't unnecessary. Graphic depiction is a preference. It tells you how a character acts in vulnerable situations, as well as how the characters connect to themselves and their bodies. As someone who doesn't read a lot of smut, I actually think that this is like probably the best argument to keep graphic sex scenes in a book. Because if you want to talk about character development, being vulnerable in an emotional situation, seeing how a character reacts in their own body, I have to say this is probably the best argument for keeping that in when people say that it's unnecessary. The same way that reading a book like The Poppy War, that has very graphic depictions of violence, you could also argue that that's unnecessary or necessary because of the way that it affects the characters, But I like that this person also said that graphic depiction is a preference, because I think it's like, you can have sex in a book without it being full erotica or full smut. And those are two different things, and there is a line. And, you cannot want to be in the scene and experiencing it with the characters, but it's still important to have those things in existence, because it's something that humans experience, and if it's important to the book, important to the character and their development, then yeah, it is important, and it pushes the plot forward, and it is necessary in those situations. I do think this is a really good way to put it. And even though people will probably think it's a super hot take, I definitely think I agree with this one. The next one I have is, special editions are overrated and money grabs. I love a good special edition, I won't lie, but the amount that they are being constantly pushed out is too much. Never mind the fact that it's mostly the same 10 authors over and over, and somehow the quality keeps getting worse. How many times will we as a community endure shoddy work and missing chapters before we collectively say something? I feel like this one is hot out of the oven, but I have to agree that I am always someone who said that, like, I'm not someone who wants 10 editions of the same book, or even 3 editions of the same book, just because one has sprayed edges or something like that. But that is just me, that's my personal preference. Unless it's a very specific book, but that book hasn't come along yet. I think the whole thing that happened with Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, now I don't know the whole ins and outs of that situation quite yet, but this whole idea of like all of these pre-orders for a book and no one knew what it was, and then everyone just got the same book that they had already read / owned, that is such a money grab to me. I think it's really greedy of the publishing houses who do that, and it's not the reader's fault by any means. I mean, they know that the readers will buy it, and instead of being upfront about a lot of things, they will just, be like, ah yes, 3 exclusive chapters, but only in this edition. So sorry to all the people who pre-ordered or bought a copy already. Now you need to have this one or else you're missing all this content and blah, 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 blah. You know, like, I just think that it's really icky to me. And I hate that that's such a common thing these days. And it just plays back into that whole idea that the publishing industry is the new fast fashion. I don't necessarily think it's entirely the same thing, but I do think there are some proponents of it where, like, publishing houses are pushing things out unnecessarily in order to just have the readers consume more and give them more of their money. I mean, and these special editions are not cheap, you know? It's not like it's $5. This is like 10, 20, 30 bucks that people are pushing out for these. And yeah, it just rubs me the wrong way. Okay, so those were a bunch of hot takes. This video is getting super long, so if you enjoyed this video, let me know if you want a part 2. I have lots more to react to. This was so much fun. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. Let me know which hot take was your favorite, and if you disagreed or agreed with any of them, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.